This year, the shorts have been so innovative and creative and just amazing, and they just keep getting better and better. I love that this film festival supports that.
Absolutely.
Because it's so amazing that, I mean, not a lot of film festivals do that, or they just use it as neglect. You know, they put it as the back, oh, we just need some programming. You know, but this festival really embraces it. And you guys embrace one another, which I love too. That's a great thing about it. I want everybody to go around the table, tell them who you are, what film you're with, and what you did on the film.
My name's Kyle Sims, and I wrote, directed, and edited Our Boy.
Awesome.
I'm Owen Lazur, and I produced for Kyle.
My name's Levi Holwell, and I'm the writer and director of A Walk Down to Water.
Gewan Brown, creative producer on Museum of Fleeting Wonders.
Yeah.
Anton, Fresco, I'm the cinematographer for Museum of Fleeting Wonders.
Nice.
Aaron With, I wrote, directed, sound design, production, editing for Out of Tune.
Show off.
I wanted to start with each of you answering this one basic question for me. Why did you choose to do a short film? Was it an experimentation? Was it a proof of concept? What was your idea in going into making these films that you've made to begin with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I mean, I'm rather young, and so I haven't really made. I'm certainly not ready to try and tackle something that's feature length. But I mean, I think also it's not just, oh, you do a short film because you only have so many resources to do it. I mean, I think, as has been proven today and in the other programs here, shorts are awesome and they stand on their own legs, and they can be really fascinating and innovative, independent of what feature films do. And I think they can do things that feature films can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about for you, Owen? Why did you join on this project?
Yeah, well, so I like producing. I'm a director too, but I like producing projects that I would never make myself, that would never, come to mind. And so when Kyle first pitched me the whatever the seed of this particular movie was, I was like, whoa, that's insane, and I want to be a part of it. So.
Nice.
Yeah, for myself, I can definitely relate to a few of those things, and I think it's a combination of a few things. Being still early on in my career, I certainly am still trying to find my voice, find my style, and maybe the playground of the short film feels a little bit more comfortable to do that. Also, just trying to open up more access and opportunities to eventually, I guess, make a feature that maybe aren't there right now, and yeah, just the writing naturally steered towards telling it in a short form format instead of something that was like 90 minutes. So all three things, everything was just yelling that this was the project I wanted to do.
Nice. Mm-hmm. And I know you guys are representing the director, but I'm sure you have your own motivations as to why you wanted to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, it was like a pretty creative process. The whole thing actually started, and so ours is sort of like an experiment and sort of like testing an idea in a way. That's how it initiated, and then it turned into the short, which we're really, really happy with. But it did start as like a way to kind of collectively workshop and talk about a feature that we're working on, and to really touch upon those like magical realism themes and ideas, and see kind of like what we could pull off in these little vignettes, you know. And so yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, Tomas and I just graduated at AFI, and we were like, he had a script for a feature, and we were like, how can we really go deeper and deeper into our characters' emotions on these? And it was a great exercise for us at the beginning. Like, we were like, okay, let's just grab a camera and just get a few, people, non-actors, and just like really go deep into like camera placement and where do we put the camera in what particular moments of the scene for the emotions to be more to really go in deep.
Yeah.
And it started like that. We were just like, let's do that. And all of a sudden it became something bigger, way bigger than what we thought. So yeah, it's just like curiosity, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. How for you?
Well, Out of Tune is my first film, and I'm a musician by trade, kind of coming to film from music. I wanted to learn filmmaking all the aspects of it firsthand by doing it on a project, and also test out an idea of what happens if you begin a film with a sound design and musical concept and let all the other elements of the film grow from that. So it's just sort of a experiment.
Now, that being said, now everybody here has acknowledged why they've made the film. I want to know, and Antoine, I'll start with you on this, because you went to film school.
Yeah.
Is it the best film school, in your opinion, is to pick up the camera and just shoot? Or do you think education matters in for a young filmmaker?
I do. I used to think that a lot. That yeah, let's just do it. Camera is, just grab a camera, go and shoot it, experience that. When I went to AFI, I don't think I would have got what I got in those 2 years in like probably 10 years,
Yeah.
And to me, it was an experience that completely changed my life. Not only on the knowledge of technical stuff, but because you already have that, you have to have that, but like really going deep into like bringing things out of yourself, of your life, of your emotions, and be vulnerable in front of everyone. I think that's such a big part of filmmaking. Like that's
Absolutely
a seed that you have to do. And yeah, you can do it, shooting a lot, but like you really going deep is hard.
nice.
Yeah.
Now on the other side of the table, we have the young ones over here who just picked up the camera and shot. Right? Did you guys go to school at all? Or?
Well, actually, yeah, we did go. Owen and I met at NYU.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and we graduated in 2018, and so this was actually my kind of thesis
Nice.
film for that school. But I think to your question, I mean, I think that's what Stanley Kubrick said, right? That's
Yeah.
the best film school, or Hitchcock.
Yeah.
To go pick up a film, and I think that's certainly true. I mean, I think it depends on each person whether the film school is the right fit, because you can go and just show up for classes and not really get anything out of it. So it's really about what you put into it. But I certainly, I would not be sitting here unless I, had chosen to go. I was going to be an architect, and then I just changed to film in my first year.
Thank all the world. Thank whoever you pray to for that.
So yeah.
I have no formal training, so I haven't been to film school other than film studies in high school, a little class there. But again, yeah, I think it depends on the person. For me, originally, it wasn't like no anti-film school stance or anything like that. Part of it is just looking at schools and originally just being like, oh, can I afford to go? Was a big challenge for me or my family. And yeah, just felt, I guess, like a more natural calling towards continuing to figure it out. And I worked at a camera store right out of high school and got my hands on more and met photographers and people there who were older with me, and they kind of got me into, inspired me. And so I have no formal training, but yeah, I don't land on any side of like a stance of, do or don't go. I have a lot of talented, great friends who've went and enjoyed it and learned so much, and then my main collaborator and I, we both haven't gone, so that's kind of the case for us. Yeah.
How about?
I actually did do film school years ago, and then worked in commercial world for a very long time. So for me, in the last 2 years, it was just a transition to kind of branching out and getting back into like the creative work.
Yeah, nice.
And thanks to Anton and Tomas, they brought me in to kind of help them to critique and to play that stubborn audience member who challenges what you're trying to do on screen and questions everything. And so I feel really grateful to have been participated in that way.
Nice.
And just get to know these guys. They're amazing.
Nice.
So yeah.
How about for you, Aaron? I mean, you're a guitarist or musician by trade, so obviously you honed your craft quite a bit, right? And so what do you feel about the film side of it?
Yeah, when I decided that I wanted to start experimenting in film, it was a little intimidating, the idea of going back to school, and I decided not to. Definitely not having that formal training puts me at a deficit in a million ways, and there are ways, I think, workarounds that you can do to get around that. Collaborating with people who can make up for your lack of experience in the technical areas, you need help, and relying on them and trusting them. And yeah, I also think having like had a whole other career and profession before entering film brings its own kind of different perspective that I may not have that technical background, but it's valuable in applying to film in its own way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's pros and cons to everything, right? So I want to know from each of you what unique challenge you had on your film that you overcame and how you overcame it. We'll start at the end.
Okay. Well, I wrote this idea about a kid who flies away, which people don't ever do. So I had to figure out how to show that or suggest that.
Which you did brilliantly, by the way.
Thank you. I
have to
appreciate
say.
that. I mean, in my case, you've seen the film, but initially it was meant to be its own kind of shot.
Yeah.
And we were much closer to him, and he was kind of in the clouds, and it was all very Peter Pan-y. And that looked pretty bad when, we saw it in the context of the rest of the work. So I was actually just I had this insurance policy where I just tilted up on the shot before, and I was just going to tilt up to credits and just imply it. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, oh, well, if I'm going to go up, I'll show the moon or something, And then I was like, oh, I can maybe just repurpose what I did shoot and just make it smaller and try to obscure it behind the black. And it's funny, I actually ended up, I accidentally spent $3,500 on like 100 different moonshots from like Pond 5. I'd gone through the whole site and I was like, really meticulous in which one do I want, and I had all these favorites, and then I finally picked one. I was like, oh, $25, this is great. And then I click, I'm checking out, and then as the website page is loading, I realized that all my favorites were in my cart, and then I was like, congratulations, you just spent $649 for your 100 shots. And I was like,
It was great. We were in different cities at the time. I got a call from Kyle. I pick up, and he's like, I messed up.
I need you to raise
And of course, Pond 5 was not going to be very, they don't care. They got their money, right?
No, they did. They're really nice.
Oh, yeah?
Well, they were really nice after I sent them, an email in all caps. Like, urgent refund needed. P.S. Your website design is flawed.
How about for you, Levi? What was the unique challenge?
I think film's really interesting in that you, of course, a lot of mediums face this as well, but I think film is known for so many logistical hurdles around it being expensive and locations and stuff. So outside of just creatively prepping to figure out what the essence of this project you're going to make or this story you're going to tell, so for me, I just immediately think of what was more daunting, just figuring out the script or figuring out where to shoot something. But I guess it's more interesting, logistically, just the stuff I shot in Denmark. Originally, I'm from Canada and I live in a landlocked province. I'm a 12-hour drive to our nearest ocean, but still I thought that was my best bet to film that part of the film. But I originally, I actually ended up doing a family trip, started to come together to Denmark anyways. And I was like, if I'm all the way over there, it might be a really good opportunity to shoot something. But just not having the resources to bring anyone in. So I just got a rental car. I brought a little GH5S camera and I just drove around for 2.5 weeks trying to find spots. So it was a lot of just marching into the woods or standing in the rain and filming grass, and then laterwards being well, that was a tough day. I didn't use anything. And I needed one person to be on camera over there, and I had ideas of what I wanted that woman to look like walking on the beach. So I have third cousins I met once when I was 13 in Denmark, and I was recruiting them and asking them to text their friends that are my age and be send us photos of your mom, maybe she wants to be in our film. And I was sitting down at a dinner table once, and I was leaving in a week, and I had the beach that I wanted to film at 3 hours away from this farmhouse that my distant family is there. And I was all right, we're getting desperate here. We need to find someone. And they run a farm, and the dad of the family starts talking in Danish to his two daughters and the mom, and he got the idea of this young intern who was working on the farm, and he calls him and he's send us a photo of your mom. And he doesn't know what's going on, but she ended up being in the film, but she didn't really speak any English. So my one cousin came as a translator, and we're like standing there in the rain, and I'd be like, all right, now start walking, and then it was so windy, and then she'd yell in Danish like 4 times, and she'd like, okay, and like, so just like all those fun stories that come from making something with a low budget, or, you know, that part of the film was no budget went into that, and I kind of love that about indie filmmaking. Hurdles like that produce fun stories.
How about for you guys, what was a unique challenge? I gotta imagine trying to fit it in a box is kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, because well, one of the things, like one of the reference that we had was we really want this to be like a museum, and if you walk into a museum, it really is a very objective place. But then when you get closer, and emotions start to come out from art pieces, right?
Yeah.
And as a cinematographer, that was so challenging for me because you want to go closer to people, right? You're always attracted to those things, right? But you know, kind of like taking out emotionality and understanding when to go into it. That was like the line that I was kind of like navigating with Tomas about, like, how do we do this and where do we want to go in and out, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting dynamic too is that it seems like you get closer and closer each vignette. Was that a design of yours?
I think so. I think that was kind of like a plan that it kind of like, we didn't really design the frames that much. We talked a lot about the characters, and then like things were just like obvious.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like how we ended up working on. Yeah.
What for you, Aaron? What was a unique challenge for you?
Well, in Out of Tune, there are these sound shrines that emit this big, powerful noise, but filming these images, they're just static monuments. So the challenge was, how do we create a visual world where you can feel and see the sound that's happening? So that's where our VFX studio got involved, and it was just going through tests with them, determining types of interactions where someone could manipulate or hit or apply power juice to these static objects in ways that we could make it seem like it's vibrating and resonating. And yeah, just a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, that's nice. I find oftentimes when you're engaged in such a process and a project that you really have an idea of what you want to see and do, right? But sometimes things change and adjust, but every one of your projects on this panel here is very poetic, and I'm wondering, I mean, every single one of you have a rhythm and a language that you follow through from beginning to end in every single one of your shorts. And I'm wondering, was that the effort of gathering all this together, or was that the design you had and then trying to fit into that design? I mean, you kind of already answered that question,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it really was. I mean, it was by design. I mean, as we were trying to test the, you know, the theory and test the, you know, the actual application of kind of what the idea was, that we did want to follow a pattern and test it with just different scenarios, but see if we could still draw that really thin line between, you know, reality and magic, and say, you know, where do you lie, right? And so we did have to follow. I mean, we created some pretty strict guidelines actually for what, like how we wanted to operate.
Nice.
So yeah, and so that pattern definitely kind of like sort of naturally occurred
Yeah.
based on those guidelines that we created, you know, to kind of accomplish this.
nice. How about for you, Levi? Because you have a real like actual poem
Right.
that really goes through the end.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, it's interesting. Like even some of my filmmaker friends, obviously everyone has a different style, and on this project, yeah, just the tone. A lot of the decisions on framing or camera movement or no camera movement or what lenses would be used, like that was built in from the earliest stages, and I think all of those decisions are obviously the tools at your disposal to try to help build a convincing tone or have someone, you know, an audience member settle into
Yeah.
the story. So definitely that was a new challenge for me. It was by design, but I was like very insecure about it on set, of like, especially at the motel, because I just knew when I walked on the water I didn't want to photograph it like beautifully. Again, I would do a lot of things differently. I'm not saying I nailed it or something, but like I was really insecure of our decisions sometimes to have compositions that like you wouldn't put in your demo reel, and sometimes my friends, they meant the best, they're like, but don't you want to move the camera here, you know, like it might be more exciting if you dolly, and I was like trying to commit to what I thought might be a payoff if I commit, you know, to a visual language, but I was still really insecure about it. And then a few days later, like I was just sitting in a theater watching like a blockbuster, and I was like, what have I made? Like I've made the most ugly, boring movie ever. Like it looks nothing like Mission Impossible. So they're completely unrelated, but like it is a challenge sometimes to like, you know, you make a film and you want to be like have a lot of conviction in the decisions you made, but I was really insecure about it the whole time about if it was gonna work or not. But I tried to build it by design. Yeah.
How about for you guys? Did you?
Yeah, I mean, to what you said about rhythm, our design was to only have 10 shots, and there wasn't going to be any coverage or any editing, so it really had to work on set, you know, what we filmed.
That was the approach from the beginning too, was to put
Yeah.
you wanted to put yourself in a box. Essentially. You're in 10 boxes.
And also the kind of the previous short I had done, I basically the way I'd kind of what I'd written and shot, it left so much to be decided in editing, and it was a real nightmare, so I didn't want to do that. So that's why this time around it took like an hour to edit, probably.
The day after the shoot.
Yeah, the day after, it's like, oh, here's the cut. But yeah, I mean, all those rhythms within each shot had to be really meticulously kind of tested and worked out and discovered.
Sure. And yours is a composition for the most part, so I would imagine you had to have some idea that you were going to go from A to B at that point, because you had a kind of song going on throughout the entire thing.
Well, I had a sound design concept, but I did not actually map the sounds to the footage until I got into the editing phase.
Oh, okay, awesome.
So that's where it became kind of an interplay of taking shots and speeding them up or slowing them down to match a rhythm of each of his mallet hits on the metal beams, such that it would have like a musical rhythm and a melodic arc, and also work with how fast he was actually moving. And while I tried to guide him on a sort of melodic arc idea I had, it was impossible while he's like suspending himself and holding on to the bars to get him to do that with absolute precision. So there's a lot of like time shifting to make it work.
Interesting. All right, so you're done with this movie. I mean, you guys are going to go around and do your things and everything. What are you going to take from this film that you've just created that you're going to bring to the next one?
No, so go ahead.
Okay. I feel bad you guys are always starting. I'm always at the top. It's funny because I've never been like a huge sci-fi person, but in this whole process of writing for a musical concept, it keeps driving me towards this exercise of like world building. And the treatment I'm writing now is similarly like a dystopian world that has musical attributes.
So you're going to tackle a feature. Is that the
I'm
plan?
writing a pilot, actually.
Oh, nice. Oh,
Yeah.
cool. So episodic.
Mhm.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Tomas is developing a feature that was, what this started this.
Oh, awesome.
He's developing that, and Gewan and I, we just got the rights for a book, and we're starting to write an adaptation. I'm writing it with Gewan as well, and we're hoping to shoot next year. Is a story that is based in Ecuador, in the Andes,
Okay.
from an Ecuadorian author that we're super excited to
Cool.
to start
Yeah.
Awesome.
telling people. Yeah.
An indie author. Did
yeah,
they publish on their own?
Yeah. Well, no. It's
Small press?
yeah. It's an Ecuadorian author. He's mainly a poet, but also he has like some narrative work, and he's wrote these eight little stories. Magical realism, very Latin American style, and we're doing it, and I'm planning to direct it.
Sounds like right up your alley.
Yeah.
I think like in a small sample size of the things I've made, lots of times the thing I make after what I just finished up is almost like a reaction to it in a way. So that's a huge part of actually indicating what comes next. Is I just feel like I spent a lot of time in a certain atmosphere, like headspace or music and all the influences of this project, and obviously some of them are always going to be part of maybe my DNA as a filmmaker, but while that's happening and I spend a lot of time there, it's like I just feel like I have then these other energies building up.
Yeah.
So now I want to make something. I'm working on a short that I hope to shoot later this year that's like very different in terms of it just feels like the opposite side of this coin, and so I feel like I always take that away from the project as it informs what I want to do next, of course, in terms of what I learned along the way, but then also it's like I just depleted the reserves of maybe some of like those emotions on this one, and now I've got all of these other different types of energies and atmospheres, and now I just want to whip over there and make something that's going to feel very, very different.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, personally, I took away from making this movie was like the power of compositions and the way you can, a film can be sort of like painting. It can be different too. And the film I made before Our Boy was like very much like put the camera right in somebody's face and follow them everywhere, and try and get into their head a little bit just by being close to them. And then after we made this, 6 months later, I made another short, and it was almost all of it was very still. No crazy zoom in, zoom outs, but I was much more conscious of the power of where you put people in a frame and how they move,
Nice.
So I took that away I learned that from Kyle.
Nice.
I think whatever the next thing is, the thing I would take away is the willingness to take risks in in the story, and also how the thing is about what it's about. Because I remember when I was kind of writing it and redrafting this thing every week, kind of just constantly being anxious and doubtful about, is this gonna work the way we're doing this?
Yeah.
Will
this,
anyone even understand?
Yeah, will people understand and all this? And I even kind of debated like pushing it off or kind of changing what I was gonna do. And so I don't know. I think I would like to keep taking risks and doing things that sound kind of strange and crazy and see what
Nice.
happens.
Awesome. So, what do you love about being an indie filmmaker? What is it that you just cherish about this idea, about who you are?
Well, I don't have the experience of working in a non-indie situation to compare it to, but I will say that in this particular production, because it was a learning experience and I wanted to try out different methods of production, we did a lot of rewriting and changes in post that, while extremely inefficient and would have been extremely costly in like a real production environment, we had that freedom to do that and make changes and kind of flow with where the energy of the film was taking us. So I appreciated that freedom.
Nice, awesome. You guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think the indie community is really the reason to be doing an indie, right?
Yeah.
Because the reaction that you get and the information that you can gather and the experience that you can then like bounce off of people. I mean, what's been great is that like all of us here have all spoken to each other about our films, you know? And so that kind of collaboration, I think, is extremely important. I know that, in our team, that was all it was about, Tomas Gomez Bustillo was not here, but, in spirit he is, because of the kind of collaboration that we did, we're all like well informed. And I think as we all speak to each other and like, collaborate, the amount of information that we get back is just so valuable. And, and plus, and I think Slamdance overall as an experience has been just amazing. Yeah.
I was going to
it
say,
really formulates a community.
It's the unique thing about this film festival, right?
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
different than anything else anybody
Yeah.
will ever experience.
It's super great.
Yeah, it's right off the bat, you're like friends with everyone. Everyone's like, "Dude,
Yeah, and
what
to
a
be
cool
honest,
thing
like, I
about
mean,
it," you
I don't know, I
like-
don't want to like, sponsors, like, and stuff like that, right? Like, I know that this festival has sponsors, but not to, say anything bad for the sponsors, but I'm not really sure who they are, and in a way that's good.
Exactly.
And, and so kudos to those. Well, kudos, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's hilarious. So kudos to those sponsors, though, that it wasn't plastered everywhere. So, all right, so here you go. You get your time in the limelight, right? But that's something that I thought was just so amazing. I really appreciated that it just wasn't overbearing. You know?
I agree.
I think curiosity and freedom and excitement is like, that's indie. That's what it is. It's just like you wake up every morning and you're like, yes, I'm doing this. Like, I'm taking my own risks. I'm doing my own things on my own terms, and it's me. If I fail, it's gonna be on me, but it's my thing. So that's what I love about it.
Nice.
Yeah, honestly, those are all like great answers. I don't know if I could add much more. Truly, community. I love what Anton just had to say, and I second that wholeheartedly.
Nice. Owen, what do you think?
Well, I think, I'm sure like coming from the commercial world, it's like when you try and leverage your skills in filmmaking to make money and make a living, it's kind of easy to, you get sucked into these other worlds. You're shooting live stuff, or you're making commercials, which is, Kyle and I kind of both work in that world generally, and neither of us are excited to return. But it's easy to forget sometimes, and then you come to a place like this and you see people who are making art, and you realize you remember why you started doing it and what's going to allow you to keep doing it and keep being energized for your whole life.
Nice.
Yeah, like I said, I feel like I'm just kind of starting out, so I can't speak too much to kind of being an indie filmmaker, I feel like, but I think attending this festival has really given me a lot of hope about the future of it, and like these guys mentioned about the authentic community aspect of it. But I think, overall, what I adore about indie filmmaking is those are the people who, kind of like I was saying, like they take the risks that then set the stage for what bigger films are going to do. And even someone like Christopher Nolan, who came through here, who's always kind of been a
Russo
trailblazer.
brothers.
Right. And now he's spending like $250 million on this kind of weird time travel movie.
Right.
That's the kind of big risks that that I like to see, on the big screen.
Yeah.